So welcome back to the King's Forge for a segment we call Sharpening Iron. And we're so glad you could be with us today. And more than anything, we're glad Dave is back.
Yay, Dave.
Hey. He had a really great visit with the doctor. Things are stable.
Yes.
Which is really good.
Good stuff.
To be stable. And you had your first treatment this week, back on the regiment for the maintenance of the chemo. So we're in prayerful thoughts for Dave, but we're so glad he's back. And this is part two.
Part two, and what we're discussing is division within our church. And so we're going to get right to that. So if you'll hang around for just a minute, we're going to be right back here in the Forge.
Stay with us. Well, welcome back. We're glad that you're with us, and again, we're eager to talk about this topic because in today's world, we are faced with a lot of division, aren't we, Mike?
Oh, yeah. Every day.
Division in political parties, division in our lives, division in what we don't need is division in the church. But that's been a long-standing problem, hasn't it, Randy?
It has been. And what caused the sort of urgency in my mind, in my heart, to want to discuss this topic is the warning from Jesus himself that's found in both Mark 3:24, but it's also found again in Luke, and Luke is a little bit worded slightly differently, and I'm going to use that one, Luke 11:17. Jesus says, "Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falleth." And when last week we talked about things that are aspects of division that we can identify within our church. We've talked about some denominational divisions where members of the body of Christ have difficulty seeing eye to eye on things. We talked about some theological divisions, and this for purposes of the discussion, it's beliefs in certain doctrines within different denominations of churches. Today we're going to continue in that aspect, and the first thing I want to talk about is that we actually see racial lines in our churches. There are
big one.
Yeah, we have churches that some people identify as black churches, and churches that some identify as white churches, and to a degree, I can understand certain aspects of that, especially if, let's say, it's a Hispanic church, and your native language is being spoken, and so it's easier for you to understand.
Sure,
I very well understand that. And I think that there's a need and a place for that. But what I get concerned about is, do we let these lines keep us from interacting congregation to congregation and believer to believer? And more often than not, sometimes it does, if we're being honest with ourselves. And that's what I wanted to address about this topic right now. I mean, I do understand, the need for different languages and that kind of thing. But Jesus and being a Christian does not always mean being comfortable. Right. Matter of fact, quite the opposite. I think Jesus made many people uncomfortable. Yeah. And I think that if we seek our own comfort and security, I think part of the time we're missing the point. What do you think, Dave?
Well, and I think, again, in one of the shows I watch a lot now, is The Chosen. All throughout the episodes, Jesus is trying to bring people together he's trying to remind the disciples that, don't hate the Samaritan. Don't hate those other people that did war 100 years ago. You weren't even born.
Right. Yeah.
You weren't even born. One thing I wanted to speak about, but before God put that on my mind, is I love this topic of racial division, because back 25 years ago, right as I was going to the ministry, I had my little home church I'd go to, but what I'd do, I'd get up early, and I'd drive all the way to Nashville, 30 miles. My home church was 2 miles down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But 30 miles down the road was the black church. And man, their spirit was just incredible. And I loved it. And they loved seeing the white guy, come in crying, and I'd get all emotional because they were so spiritual. And then I'd go to my home church and I'd be like, but I think we miss out, is where I'm going with that. Is me and one of my best friends in ministry, Brother Sean Cook, he, black guy, and we just love each other's spirit. We go to a special place when we're together, and I think we're missing out. I really think we're missing out.
I believe, from my experience in walking with Jesus through the Holy Spirit, that God is no respecter of color.
No.
We all have hearts. They all pump blood. If you cut me, do not bleed red. I mean, we that's no matter what color our skin is, right? We all bleed red. We all bleed blood. We're all human beings.
Right.
I know when I was youth director here at our church that we've got a African American church just right down the street, just about 3 or 4 miles, and got to know a gentleman that through work that went there, and we have a friends and family every fall, and it's dinner on the grounds kind of thing. We don't eat on the ground, we own tables, but I mean, what I'm talking about. And we invited them to come up, and their choir, sang and ate with us right here on the main street in Murfreesboro in the South. Black and white people sitting down, eating together. And then we went to theirs. And David's right. Oh my gosh. It's me and my daughter and a couple of girls that sang. I played the guitar, and it was probably the only folk music there because I do the James Taylor, kind of thing, right? And, but it moved them to tears, and they moved us to tears, in their music, but it's also the worship. And we can't and I don't think, from what my experience has been, that we do that as much as we used to.
Well, and
right, that division is not as strong, but it's still there.
Oh yeah.
Well, what we see is, I mean, we are to a degree a microcosm of the society in which we live.
Yeah.
And we know very well the history of racism in America.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've seen recently is a lot of claim that racism is just as bad as it ever was. And I don't see that. I disagree with that viewpoint wholeheartedly. Do I still think that we have racial division? Yes. And as a result of that, I also believe that the church should be and should conduct itself as such, a leader of unity among men, of all races, of all things. If we could find ways to celebrate and examine and learn about the different cultural aspects that we all bring to the table, rather than segregating them, I think our experience would be far richer.
Oh, yeah.
I think there would be so much. I think there would be more positive things derived from that than we could actually probably conceive of sitting here at this table.
So let me tell this quick story, because our interim pastor told me this, and I can't remember how we got on the topic. But he had, back when, it was 9/11, because 9/11 was Sunday, and we had a little thing at the church about 9/11. And we were talking about that, and he was serving a church in San Diego, okay? And the first thing he did was reach out to the mosque, out there, because a lot of people had questions he couldn't answer about their religion and what's this going on, because it was kind of tied, initially it was kind of tied to that pretty quick. They didn't know everything, right? But it was tied to, these were Muslim people that did this. in the Muslim religion. And so he reached out. They set up a deal to come visit and answer questions. We did the same thing here at this church, okay, which is really cool. We got a mosque here in town, and we it was great. I learned a lot. But here's what happened. They found out through this process where they had the meeting planned and everything that some of those people, and I can't remember if it was the towers or if it was the Pentagon, but some of them were from San Diego, from that mosque.
Oh, man.
And he said that the city went crazy. You're not going to do this. And he said, it's the only time I have ever had to hire. I felt like I had to hire some protection.
The city opposed it.
I mean, the city people of the city. It wasn't the city government.
Okay.
It was this just went out. Oh my gosh, you can't meet those people. So it's not always black and white. It's Muslim. So that we have to break down those walls. And even they had it. It was great. There nothing happened. He said he had one guy kind of spoke up a little bit, but it wasn't about what they believed or we believe. It was more about learning about their culture and the people, and But we have a bad problem right now in our society it's seeping into the church really bad, of really listening to the fringe. Whether on any topic, it seems like it's the ones that won't. Oh man, why am I going here? I guess God's telling me to, but it seems like I have to be right. I know the way. You got to be wrong, and that's what causes a lot of this division. It's nothing more than Satan keeping us away. I know the answer's coming, so if you guys are hanging around with us, we're going to talk about the answer to all this.
I think what you're saying is,
help me,
and correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I will, but no.
Is that you're saying? You're trying. I'm assuming you're outlining the difference between disagreement and division.
Yeah.
You don't have to be divided to disagree with
No.
it. Yeah.
Right.
If we three disagree on stuff, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But we don't live there.
Yeah, we don't make that the issue.
We agree to disagree agreeably.
Well, and the problem here is, guys, and I've said it a couple of times, is the world is turned upside down. And the reason why I'm saying that is years ago, back in the 50s, 60s, the world was coming to the church for answers. And now it's like the church is sitting on the sidelines, waiting for the world, to make a decision, and then we'll play along. And I think that that's a awful thing that's happening in the church right now.
Mm-hmm.
We need to take back our leadership, but it just greater amplifies division.
Mm-hmm.
When we don't, I think we do. I think this church would say they know what they believe. I think church would say, I know what I believe. But do you? Because one of the things I think we're supposed to stand for in the church is right, is the righteousness of God. Not my right, but what God sees.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know. It just came to my mind. I put it out there.
Sure.
Well, we get in the way.
Oh boy,
we really do. Like I said, we can't be wrong. I have to be right. There's got to be somebody right and got to be somebody wrong, and that's true. God's right. We're wrong.
So,
if we put ourselves above God, I'm beating the table because we talked about hitting the table. So that can, because your color is different, because you worship different, all the stuff we've talked about so far, well, you're different than I am. And we focus on that as a negative instead of a positive. If everybody was Mike Martin, man, it would be a boring place, first of all.
Very true. Well, and the reason I paused is because you both sort of went a little bit different directions, and so I'm digesting.
You're trying
to put. Yes, we're not used to three people being here.
That's okay. I'm digesting.
We're glad you're here, Dave.
I'm digesting the two different angles, because David, you started to go down a path that was a little bit outside of racial division, which is fine.
Right.
But you started outlining more of a moral division that we see in our church.
Right.
Which is a division that I had not as you were talking,
You wrote it
I
down.
made a note. I'm like, oh, there is moral.
that's
There's some moral division.
We could do a whole episode on that one.
Yeah.
And so the thing about it is, there's even, I think, a division within the church and between the church and those who are outside of the church, those who are not believers, who profess atheism or whatever it is they profess. A huge divide about, number one, what is and what isn't sin. And Mike and I had a discussion several segments ago, and all of a sudden it occurred to me to ask these questions. What size is sin, David?
What size?
Yeah, if I had to go get a container at the UPS store, what size of box would I need to hold sin?
He did me the same way. I know.
Okay, well, hang on.
I ain't giving you an answer.
All
I'm
right, well,
sorry.
it's all right. All right. Well, all right. Well, hang on. Let's change
Well,
the color. Let me. All right. What color is it? What color is sin?
So you're trying to get to where he's at, right?
Yeah. We're trying to. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember he's got chemo brain.
How much does sin weigh? If I had to have a scale to weigh sin, how much does it weigh?
You don't know.
My point being, we can't define what sin is.
We
Right.
can't.
So we can't judge sin.
Right.
The Bible defines what is and what is not sin. The church doesn't define it. People don't define it. Our philosophy doesn't define it.
Well, and I'll go one step further. The law defines what sin is, and that's what Jesus didn't come to change the law. He come to. Now, I don't want to say fix, because I'll get.
He came to fulfill the law.
He came
He
to
fulfilled
fulfill, but it changed it because grace came in the picture, and we're supposed to live by grace.
But
now.
see, Dave, grace was intertwined in that the whole time. We didn't know it, but God had it planned, right?
Right. He kept trying to show it.
He sent all kinds of prophets to talk to him.
Yeah.
But he laid all that stuff out so we would know what grace was. If we
Right.
didn't know what the penalties were and what the punishment was,
Right.
and what the negative part, we said this before. A lot of people come up to me and say, "Well, how can you believe in a God that lets all this stuff happen?" And not too long ago, we said, "Well, if there wasn't evil in this world, we would know what good was." And I truly believe that.
When somebody asks me that, how can you believe in a God that let this evil happen? And my question automatically that comes to my mind is, how can you deny a God that forgives it?
Oh yeah, amen. Man, we can just run down a rabbit hole. So let's touch back on the moral more. But let's say what
moral division, and I mean, so many people have so many ideas, differing ideas, even within the church, on aspects of morality. And morality is always a sticky wicket when it comes to subjects within the church, because of you've got there are some denominations that believe that if you've been divorced, that you're hell bound.
That's your question.
And there are some that don't believe that.
Right.
There are some that believe, I don't even know exactly how to even word it sometimes, but
I'll ask you.
Sure, ask a question. Yeah,
I gotta ask this question: is anybody moral?
Is anybody moral?
Do you know any man that is moral, that follows the rules, that is? We talked about this. Good.
No.
We good? Is anybody moral?
No.
So what does it matter what my morals are to you?
Right.
Because you can't define only.
Well, not only can you not define, you can't judge.
And it's not that what's moral for you is not moral for me. It's just not our job.
Right.
Our job is to, Jesus, when he came and said, I fulfilled the law, and it's probably not in the same place, what did he say the greatest commandment was? To love one another, love God, and love others as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So, yeah, I may drink a beer every night. And for you, that's immoral. Because you're a teetotaler. You don't drink at all.
Right.
What does it matter to God if our hearts are in the right place if I drink a beer? You think he's not going to... I can't believe anybody would think that God was going to send somebody to hell for a behavior. He doesn't. The reasons you go to hell, the reason you're separated from God, is in your heart.
You reject the
reject
remedy.
the Christ.
You reject which the remedy's coming to all this. We promise. We'll talk about the remedy because we've been beaten up, and we're not trying. I'm going to say this real quick. We're not beating up the church.
No.
We're beating up ourselves because you know what? We are the church.
We are the church.
That building and an hour every Sunday don't cut it. If we don't start following the tenets here and look at what's dividing us daily,
we can't rectify what we don't identify.
Exactly. That's all we're doing.
The one thing I want to, because you said something about the fringe, and as I think when you said fringe, you might have been talking about the non-believer or whatever. What I call fringe are people that believe that aren't churched or that go to church some, maybe on Easter and Christmas, but they're on the fringe. They believe in God and believe in Jesus, but man, they don't want anything to do with this because it's too divisive. So
but we're making it divisive.
I know it, and that's what I wanted to speak to. That is because there's so many people that are in my ministry that are on the fringe, man, and they're believers, but they won't have anything to do with the church because the church is so divided. And guys, when you can let what songs you play divide your church, and when you can let, we say the color of the carpet, but it's worse than that now. It's between people that want to, one thing you said was, okay, if you're divorced, you can't, you're hell bound. I would go one step further and say, I believe a lot of the churches, they'll believe that you can be forgiven of divorce, but you can't fill the pulpit. You can't hold office. You're not a good elder, candidate for elder anymore. Okay? Mm-hmm. And I know people that's actually happened to that have lost ministries over it, but not their salvation. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So is it a moral issue or is it it's...
Well, and that begs the question, and see where that goes is that begs the question, how does the church qualify sin? If all men are sinners and fall short of the glory of God, and if we say we don't sin, there's no truth in us, according to the Word.
Right.
So how are we saying, well, it's just that sin that we're going to pick on?
Right.
See? And we get divided over that. We miss the point.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. We miss the point.
And let's... I want to try to keep the ball rolling.
We went down a rabbit hole with that because we can talk for hours about that.
We've talked about denominational division. Mm-hmm. We've talked a little bit about theological division. We've identified that there's racial division. We've identified that there's moral division. And now I want to talk a little bit about the fact that there's social division. And what I mean by social, because racial is an aspect of social, but racial specifically, we were talking about the differences in people's either color or culture. This one I want to talk about the differences in their class. And so I have seen people that may not be, let's just say they're not as successful maybe in life or in a job. They don't make the kind of money some of the other people may make in the church. They don't have some of the finery or jewelry or clothing of a certain standard of some others. And some people look down on them because they seem to have less and question that,
There's not some. There's a lot.
There's a lot, man.
Inside and outside the church. There's a lot. We have quite a few homeless people. There's a big difference in class there, okay?
Yeah.
In Murfreesboro, Tennessee, okay? And we're very close to a lot of transportation kind of areas, and we've got awning, we've got some benches out there, and it's nothing to come over here and see homeless people, sitting on the benches here at the church. Are you going to ignore them? Walk right past them? We have a dinner every second Sunday, and there's some of us always go down the square if there's nobody here and invite people, homeless people, to come eat with us.
Yeah.
And we don't do it every time, and I'm not saying we're great and wonderful because, there are people in this church that walk right past them. We had a gentleman that slept on our steps for months. And some people saw him and some people didn't. His name was, I believe I'm saying his name was Ralph. But anyway, I talked to him and such. So we can't let the fear But you have to be cautious. You have to be a good steward of you know. There's a line that we have to cross that we don't cross, I think. But that's one thing. And another thing that's happened to me this week is I started a temp gentleman with us that got out of the penitentiary 7 days ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And they're supposed to, I thought you do these background checks and stuff. I don't know what happened. But I tell you what, God has taught me so much. Started Tuesday this week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, today's Friday. 4 days. I've never been with somebody more transparent in my life. I've learned more about being in the penitentiary because the man had nothing. Nothing. No money. And I've been blessed enough to help him out with food and some things, and we got some stuff here at the church. We have a food bank and stuff, and so that way, but just taking the time to spend some time with that person that had been locked up for 7 years.
This is not my witness. This was a witness shared with me from someone else who had an interaction with somebody that was homeless, and they saw they were on the streets or whatever, and basically they went over to him and they gave him some water and started talking to him, and the dude burst into tears. And
you see me, right? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see me?
I'm not invisible?
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's more than common among people who have been displaced by homelessness is they feel that they are invisible. They feel they have no voice. They feel that they are not just they're just completely rejected by society, and they feel like they have no place, and not just a home, but no place to belong. Okay, well, we're back from a little camera glitch there, and what we were discussing was a story shared with me about a man who was interacting with somebody who was homeless and giving them some water, and they were amazed that they were even being seen. Yeah, just emotional moment. And what I was saying is that's a very prevalent thing. Is the people who have been displaced from their homes feel displaced from so much more. They feel like they're a pariah of society, and maybe this is a really harsh thing to say. I wonder if if you go back into the ancient days and the days of the biblical times when Jesus was here walking, and we read of leper colonies where people were shunned to if they had leprosy. And, nobody was allowed to go in that area. Nobody was allowed to talk with them. Nobody was allowed. And so, in some ways, I don't know if we ever say this or not, in some ways, some of these homeless encampments that we find are like leper colonies. These people, and they're not quick to trust you because they've been betrayed. They've been hurt. They have a lot of the weight of the emotional damage that does to somebody because they feel horrible, and it makes, oftentimes it can make ministry to those people more difficult because they're less inclined to trust you. They don't some and there are people that take advantage of people in that situation.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah.
And they don't know who's who.
But Dave wasn't with us, but we had a meeting with Pastor Bob
Beeman
last Sunday because his ministry is expanding and maybe moving to Murfreesboro, and the gentleman that they feed the homeless there in Nashville, Tennessee, was telling us sometimes it takes a year and a half just to build the relationship so people will let you help them.
I tell you what, a lot that brings down some of those walls is when you'll say you're a pastor, you'll say this, that, and the other, but it helps. But it's probably worse now. But I had a story. I don't know how I found myself at this gas station, but the bus just got out. The Greyhound bus just brought some new guys in, and a new guy, ladies and gentlemen, and coming off the bus, and I looked over, and this kid was looking down, no eye contact, wasn't talking, had a hard time even talking with the cashier. And I said, brother, what's going on? How'd you get here? And he said, well, I just got out of jail, and I've been, I don't know how long he's incarcerated, but you could tell he was beat down by the world. And man, that's one thing my overseers when I was in Methodist church, they would call me that wild preacher that would do anything for anybody.
Hey, I'm your brother. I know who you brought home and what you did.
It was just
he was amazing. Still is.
But it was, to me, it's normal, and I'm not tooting my own horn. We should always be this way, and be careful about it. I mean, I was being prayerful as I went, but I called some churches. I got, because the churches I served didn't have a lot of funding. I called some churches, got some money together, went and got him some jeans, went and got him some shaving stuff, and really put him up in a motel for a couple of days. And it took my night. It took 2 or 3 hours for me.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of days. Did you know that man called me back? About 3 years. Brother David, I'm getting married today.
Oh, man.
And I'm living. I've got a house. Man, you couldn't end a story any better. But then on the flip side of that.
Oh, there's been a many that yeah.
Well, there's a flip side of that. I'm not talking about really any homeless people I've helped that didn't turn out pretty good. But on the flip side of that, had a person in the church one time, had a lot of money, had a big farm, felt like he could run the church because socially he was up here. And we were all down there. And if you mess and don't do what I say in this church, I'm going to pull my funding.
Yeah.
And that, you talking about hurtful.
Now that, we're transitioning a little, because that's the next division, and that's monetary division.
Well, monetary, but
economical
social,
division.
Social.
They're hand in hand.
Before we leave this, I want to say one more thing. We talked
please.
about the homeless. Let's put something else on the table too. It's not just that. I heard a song not too long ago about who's going to be Jesus, and it starts out about this guy that come home and his wife had left him, and he went to church the next morning, first time by himself. She was gone.
Oh,
who's going to go to that man? There are people that are divided socially from us, sitting right next to us.
That won't say a thing.
They won't ever say a thing because they're afraid of.
They got the mask on.
What's the church people going to say? I'm going to be judged. And it's many, many different things. And part of our journey here at my church is learning to break down those walls and those barriers so people will trust each other. And they can come to you. I'm an elder here at the church, and I want to be as transparent as I possibly can, about I'm on Jesus' side, and he loves you, and I love you too, and let me help you if I can through this. And sometimes it's just holding a hand and letting somebody cry. Yep. And they know they're seen, just like the homeless person you were talking about. And it's broken homes, it's kids with, what is another shameful thing? Your kid's on drugs. Your kid gets arrested. I mean, there's so many things that we walk in the doors of our churches when we have this special time together, that we're supposed to be in the assembly and worshiping God and being Jesus to one another. How you doing? Oh, I'm fine. And it was we got that mask like you're talking about.
Yep.
As a pastor, as long as and that I think hinders us if we're not in relationship and putting our money where our mouth is. Oh, God is so good. He will do all this, and he loves you, and we love you, but you got to put your money where your mouth is.
The church should be a place or a group, because I don't believe the church is a place. I've said that many times.
It's a person.
The church is a group of people. It's the
well,
believers.
yeah.
But the church should be something that is safe enough for anybody to allow themselves to be vulnerable without fear of gossip, dissent, retribution, or judgment.
Have y'all ever been sitting in a service and a homeless person walk into your church?
Yeah.
I was doing something. I don't know if I was praying over the table or something. The looks. This wasn't too long ago. The looks on people's faces. The shock. And all they did was come and sit down. And she had 2 or 3 bags of stuff with her. She had her stuff with her stuff. She didn't beg for money from anybody after it was over.
Yeah.
Well, we did have one of our wonderful ladies invite her to dinner. We were having a dinner, our monthly dinner. She ate with us. We had a great conversation. So, and it could have went a different way. I know that. But Jesus says the poor and the needy and the homeless will always be with us.
Mm-hmm.
He does not promise that we get enough Christians, there won't be any more pain in this world.
I dressed up as a homeless person.
I've heard that story before.
And
yeah, I know.
I almost got hit. The second pew that I hit, because I was saying, "Hey man, you got some change?" And when I did that, the guy reared back to hit me, and I said, "Bro, I'm your pastor." And then I walked on, and I went up, and I did a whole little spiel about, Jesus cleaning us,
Wow.
and it was from God. I take no credit, but it almost got me. It almost got me put in the hospital that day, because people are so. And this is a good guy. I just startled him. He's probably in the war, and
Well,
I touched him on the back.
you don't know, but I think that's a good story, David, because I think that when you step out there with God, and I'm not saying how to put this, I'm not saying to jump over the edge, without support, but God puts a hedge of protection. You didn't get smacked in the mouth.
No.
Something, and of course it was in the church.
Yeah,
but
I was astonished.
I'm feeling, really strong about this ministry that Bob's bringing to Murfreesboro. I want to go feed some hungry people where they're at somehow.
Well, I mean,
but you have to be careful.
You and I had a conversation about that. We, a lot of times the church spends time and energy and resources trying to make the music or the environment or the message or whatever appealing to try to draw people in.
Right.
And the word doesn't say to draw them in. The word says go to the highways and the hedges.
Yep.
And so we're even backwards in that,
But we are not beating up our churches.
No.
I know it sounds like it. But, I mean, it's getting worse and worse as we go along. To me, I'm getting a little feeling here. Because I think we're pointing ourselves.
Yeah,
we are.
I really do. Because we are. You said it a minute ago. We are the church every day.
Right, and this series that we're doing right here,
I
know right now feels very devoid of answers. Bear with us.
Yep.
Yeah,
it's coming.
We've
Sunday's coming.
Yeah, we've got one more coming, and during that one we're going to talk a little bit more about a couple of other divisional issues that we've identified. And we're also going to talk about what the word says about the cure for the problem.
There is an answer. There is an answer. There's an answer, and it's so simple.
Amen. It is,
and so hard.
And if you're watching us or if you're listening to us wherever you are, and you are engaged in discussions of how to conquer divisions in your area. We encourage you, if you discover things that we haven't talked about, do me a favor. Write it down and let us know. Because we want to know how to address everything. And there's things that I'm not going to be able to identify that you can, and we need your help. So if you want to contact us in any way, or if you have a different discussion or topic that you would like to hear us discuss here in the Forge in a Sharpening Iron segment, reach out to us. You can reach us by electronic means at onekingsforge@gmail.com. That's the number 1, kingsforge@gmail.com. Or you can reach us individually at randy@sharpening-iron.com, david@sharpening-iron.com, or mike@sharpening-iron.com. And should you wish to reach us by post or send us a package of any kind, you can do that by writing to the King's Forge, P.O. Box 2590, Shelbyville, Tennessee 37160. And as always, you can find our content, you can find merchandise, you can find information about the ministry that we're involved in and everything on the website at www.sharpening-iron.com, or you can go to thekingsforge.org. We thank you very much for those of you who are following us and partnered with us and help support us. And we want you to know very much that we love you. And we know that it's not always easy to say things that, like divisional things, that feel weighty and hard. But it's always worth it when we identify and address the problems that we have and we overcome them. That's where the victory comes. And I believe that we can all overcome the things that we're talking about here today, our last segment, and the one that's about to come. Thank you very much for joining with us. We want you happy. We want you blessed. And we want to see you back here again in the King's Forge. Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless you.